Hey, welcome back. Let's start with an important topic to you. How are things going at your airport? Most of us aren't wealthy enough that we can support our own facility. We generally have to use someone else's, often owned by a municipality or a county, although there are thousands and thousands of privately owned airports that are open for public use. Most of these are non-towered, and that's where we get into some interesting territory. The airport manager or the airport director at a non-towered airport in a rural area is very often someone who has no real aviation experience. That doesn't mean they're bad people. They were assigned to this job and they're doing the best they can in an industry that's highly regulated that they don't really have a strong grasp of. We can help them and make the situation better, or we can argue and fuss and fight and be a real pain in the ass to the point that they don't really want to deal with us. And unfortunately, that's the more common situation these days. This is where we get into the topic of politics. And I don't mean politics in the sense of government. I mean politics in the sense of how human beings interact with each other to get something done. As pilots and mechanics and users of the airport, we have certain desires, things we want to do because individuals innovate. They are entrepreneurial by nature. We want things to improve. The airport director may also want that very same thing, but they're not sure how to get it. And most of you who have dealt with government in any capacity know government doesn't innovate very well. That's not their thing. Government is exceptional at stagnation. They're really good at doing the same thing over and over, whether it works or not, because their predecessor did that, and that's the established method. This isn't something we want to put up with, but it's also not something we'll fix by going to the airport director's office, screaming in their face and telling them what a jerk they are. In all honesty, they're probably a pretty decent human being. They're just over their head. And they might be a little entrenched, and they might feel they don't have a lot of support from City Hall. We can make a difference on that front. Anyone who's been involved in local politics for any length of time knows there is a very long line of people who have a complaint, and they're vocal about it. They'll come up to you in your office. They will stop you in the grocery store. They will sit down at your table in a restaurant while you're having dinner with your spouse on a Friday night. And they'll almost all say the same thing. I pay your salary. Well, a tiny little sliver of it perhaps, but that still doesn't mean you have to be a butthead. You don't have to be so entitled and so in love with your position that you can impose on someone else's free time or treat them badly. That's not going to make progress. Try this instead. Be in that short line, the really, really short line that might only have one or two people in it who say, how can I help? What can I do to make your life easier? Now, that may not address your initial problem, but it will start developing a relationship where that airport management realizes you're not trying to be a problem. Maybe they'll listen to you a little more. Part of the issue is there is guidance on how to manage an airport. There's a lot of it, and much of it from the FAA, including FAA Order 4190.6B, the Airport Compliance Handbook. That is basically the strings that come with getting federal money to run your airport. So if your airport has never taken federal money, it's immaterial. It's a moot point. But if your airport has taken federal money to improve taxiways, to extend a runway, to add an FBO building, whatever it is, the management is bound by that document, and they may not be aware of it. Or at least they may be aware that the book exists, but they don't understand that's the instructions from the FAA to the management of what they're required to do. It is not an indication of what the users have to do. Let me give you an example of how this works in real life. Several years ago, I worked with a bunch of people to put together a flying club that became very successful at a rural, non-towered airport where there hadn't been a flying club in the past. Not too long after that club started to build some critical mass, had a lot of people involved with it, got a second airplane, they were really thriving. The flight school wasn't thriving and started to complain. They complained to the airport director. They complained to pretty much anyone who would listen. They even complained to the mayor. The mayor made a call to the airport director and said, hey, we can't have this. We can't have an unlicensed business competing with a licensed business. We've got minimum operating standards. That flight school is paying for the insurance and the employees and the space that we mandate, and the flying club is not. You got to put a stop to this. Fortunately, the airport director gave me a call and said, hey, you helped set this up. I need to find out what's going on. I own an airplane. I'm an active pilot. I've been in aviation a long time, but I can't have this. I'm not playing favorites, but I can't have this. So we got into a conversation, and I explained to them that the Flying Club is by definition a nonprofit organization. They can't offer flight instruction at all. They can't advertise it. They can't do it under the table. The Flying Club can't get involved in commercial activities. That's part of the FAA documentation. That's just their role. But a member of the Flying Club can use the club airplane to get their private certificate or add an instrument rating or seek a commercial or whatever they want to do. They're a member of the club, which gives them ownership-like rights to that aircraft, and they're not renting it. They're paying the actual operating costs. Everything they're doing is legal. It's okay. The flight school doesn't have a problem because they're not advertising for people to come learn to fly with us. That's not what they do at the Flying Club. This is not the issue that's been presented to you. The airport director took this all in and started thinking creatively. And he said, I didn't realize all that. Could I sell my airplane and get rid of all the hangar fees and the maintenance costs and the insurance that I have to pay every year? Could I join the Flying Club and just access that airplane? Would that be a problem? No, it wouldn't. That's the whole point of a Flying Club, to get a group of people who are involved, and they're sharing the cost of one or two or however many airplanes, maybe even a diverse set of airplanes, from single engines to multis to seaplanes to gliders, whatever they're interested in. As the airport director, you don't want to be on the board of directors of the club. That would be a conflict of interest. Now you're negotiating against yourself. That wouldn't be good. But just being a member, that actually might be a positive. That Flying Club crowd would have an open door to the airport director. They'd be less intimidated, and they'd be more likely to share with you their actual thoughts about how the airport runs. It wasn't necessary to get all feisty about this. There was no benefit in starting an argument or any of that. People just have to look at, what are the rules? What are we allowed to do? What are we required to do? And how do we work together to make that happen? Keep in mind, from the airport director's perspective, safety is number one. They don't want accidents. They don't want lawsuits. They don't want problems. Their secondary concern is the economic viability of the airport. And that makes sense, because whether it's privately owned and managed or whether it's municipally or county owned, there's a lot of resources being used to operate that airport. And it would be great if they could recoup that and maybe even make a profit. So before you head down to the airport manager's office and slam your fist down on the desk and start screaming about what a jerk he is, or she is, take a breath, take a beat. Real success at the airport starts with understanding the needs of the airport director and their team so they can start to understand your needs. Ultimately, you can work together collaboratively to make all those things happen in a safe, economically viable way where everybody wins. Go ahead and dream big. Be entrepreneurial. Think about what you can do to innovate at your airport and make real plans to make that happen. But be sure to include your airport director throughout the entire process. Make them your partner, and they'll make you their partner. And we'll all see a whole lot more success and much better utilization of these small, non-towered rural airports that are such a gift to general aviators and so often misunderstood, even by the people who manage them. Hey, I hope you get something worthwhile out of this. I hope you'll click the like button. If you've had an experience, good or bad, with airport management at your airport, go ahead and leave it in the comments below. It just might be helpful or informative to one of our other viewers. Subscribe to the channel and even share this video on your social media feed so somebody else can find out that maybe it's not just me. Maybe there's a way to go about this where I can find success without raising my blood pressure. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time right here on MadPropsAero channel and on your personal device.